You're watching Beyond 100 Days with Nifemi Oguntoye. The Central Bank of Nigeria has raised interest rate to 22.7% as the Monetary Policy Committee of the bank increased the benchmark rate by 400 basis points. The CBN Governor, Layemi Cardoso, said this earlier today while reading the communique of the first MPC meeting of the year in Abuja. The MPR has been 18.7% since the last MPC meeting between 24th and 25th of July last year. But with inflation now at 29.9%, the new MPR, we understand, is part of moves to tackle the country's inflation. Mr. Cardoso, who chairs the MPC, also said the cash reserve ratio has been raised to 45%, while the liquidity ratio was left unchanged at 30%. The CBN governor also exonerated himself and his team from the country's economic woes, a situation which has led to protests in several parts of the country by members of the Nigeria Labour Congress.
Considering the option of a hold policy, the evidence revealed that previous policy rate hikes have slowed the rise in inflationary pressure, but not to a desirable extent. Members considered various scenarios of hold and hike and concluded that inflation could become more persistent in the medium term and thus pose more regulatory challenges, if not effectively anchored.
We're following closely developments from the CBN and how much impact that will have on the economy in the coming days as well as the coming months. But despite last-minute push by the federal government to stop a nationwide protest by the Nigeria Labour Congress, members hit the streets today across some states in protest of the rising cost of living and economic hardship in the country. Our correspondents across the country report a heavy presence of security personnel in various states of the Federation as protesters express their frustrations at the current nationwide hardship.
The federal government, it is your responsibility, it is your duty to provide for us, to protect us. Our lives and our properties, though they are in the hand of God, but here on earth, they are in the hand of the government. It is the civic responsibility of government to provide for us, and it is also our human right for them to give us all that we needed.
Now let's get to the business of the hour. The federal government yesterday agreed to consider the implementation of the 2014 report that would ensure the merging, scrapping, and moving of several ministries, departments, and agencies. And this is coming some 12 years after the Steve Oronsaye panel submitted its report on restructuring and rationalizing federal government's parastatals and agencies, as well as a white paper that was issued 2 years after. The Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, yesterday disclosed this while addressing State House reporters after the Federal Executive Council meeting with President Tinubu in Abuja. The several agencies that will be merged include the National Agency for Control of AIDS, NACA, which is to be merged with the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, is also to be merged with Commission for Refugee Migration, while the NIPC is to be merged with NEPC, and the National Theatre to be merged with the National Troupe of Nigeria, among others. In 2011, President Goodluck Jonathan established the Presidential Commission on Restructuring and Rationalization of Federal Government Parastatals, Commissions, and Agencies, led by Steve Oronsaye. And we haven't seen much of implementation of the white papers that followed. Adiza Bala Usman is the essay to the President on policy matters, and she spoke to us on the news earlier.
As we mentioned during the press briefing, we're not going to have any job losses. The functions of agencies that are so subsumed will be transferred into certain departments in ministries. So all there won't be any job losses that will arise from this, but the area of cost savings will arise from duplication of functions, duplication of duties, and overlapping aspects of the work. So we believe that those cost-saving measures sit within the reorganization and the larger implementation of the functions of those agencies.
No job losses sounds like a fantastic idea, but how feasible is this proposal with the drastic merging and changes, recommended in the Oronsaye report? I'm joined now by former Speaker, Lagos State House of Assembly, Adeyemi Ikuforiji, who joins us live from our Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us on the program this evening.
Thank you very much.
So the need to cut the cost of governance is on the front burner again, and the Tinubu administration is looking the way of the Oronsaye report. Briefly, what do you make of this decision, and how relevant is this information in a 12-year-old document?
Well, I think first and foremost, I personally, on behalf of Nigerians who are desirous of seeing Nigeria out of the woods, we'd like to thank Mr. President for this move. I mean, after 12 years, he has decided to take the bull by the horn and do the right thing. Well, all sorts of names have been given to this thing, but personally, I would say it's the normalization of governance, because we have overbloated system. We have so many commissions, agencies, MDAs with similar functions, which I consider to be very abnormal. Now, he wants to take us to where we can say, okay, things are now normal. This is very important. It will definitely, on the long run, reduce cost of governance. And you remember, you'll agree with me that one of the greatest problems we have today is the cost of governance. The system we operate, or we have been operating, is very, very expensive. Too expensive for the country. Now, with this coming up, 12 years after the Oronsaye's report, I say, thank you, Mr. President. Please see it through. We trust you. We know you are always doing those things that people consider impossible. You can always navigate the way, and everything will come.
It is very instructive when you say that, when you say, Mr. President, when you say it's important for Mr. President to see this through, because it is not the first time that, federal governments in the past 10 years have made a similar attempt. In 2014, former President Goodluck Jonathan ordered implementation of white paper on this same report. And in 2020, President Buhari asked his SGF and head of service to merge some of these departments and agencies. Both administrations actually released a white paper in this regard, but none implemented it. How is this one different, from where you sit?
Well, the man that is the captain of the ship today is one that some of us know very well. We know that when the ship in the high seas and the stormy weather comes, he is the one to trust. We can trust him. I know if he sets his mind on something, he makes sure that he gets it done. This is not going to be an exception. I mean, 2 white papers after the report, but this man here, trust him, he will see it through. Yes, there are some obstacles. I mean, it's not going to be smooth sailing because some of these agencies and commissions and so on, they are constitutional. And some were, others were, created by the act of the National Assembly. So the laws have to be changed, amended, to suit the new dispensation. I can trust that the National Assembly will do the job as fastly as possible, and Mr. President will do his own part.
We'll talk about navigating the legislative waters shortly, but let's dig deep a little into this document. The Oronsaye report identified about 541 parastatals, commissions and agencies of the federal government, and he recommended a reduction in the number of statutory agencies from, I think, 263 to 161, while asking that 38 of these agencies be abolished and 14 reversed to departments in the federal ministry. It's a huge task, really. What challenges do you foresee, in implementing this?
It's a huge task, there's no doubt, and nobody says it's going to be so easy. It's not like tea, milk, and sugar. It's going to be really tough, but when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Tinubu is not one who believes in the simple. He wants to get it done. He will face it. He will get it done. Look, there are many things that have to be done in this case. We do know that whether we like it or not, the redundancy in the system has to be reduced. And we do know that some people will be affected. Forget about the cajoling statement of, oh, nobody will be laid off, nobody will. We know that definitely some people will have to go. When 2, 3 directors have been in charge of similar items in the different commissions or agencies they've been directing, who says that the 3 of them will now sit in one place? No. 1 or 2 will have to go. But there are ways of getting it done, and I know him as a great administrator who will get it done, seamlessly. And that's just the way I see it.
You are perhaps the first person, within the APC who has acknowledged publicly that there will be an imminent loss of jobs. And that's the reality, because from where I stand, there are about 140 heads of agencies who are going to be immediately affected. But then that's the concerns for most Nigerians, that this administration has been making such tough decisions from day one, with the president announcing that full subsidy has been removed on the 29th of May. And you saw the nationwide protest that have followed through, even the one that NLC kickstarted today. So how do you make this kind of decision again in the face of the current economic challenges, with what appears an imminent loss of jobs and those that will be affected?
Well, when you have to make changes sometimes come with its pain. And as it is said, there is no gain without pain. Of course, some people will have to go, but we don't just throw them out. I think the government will have to do the necessary, encourage some people, to retire even voluntarily, give them incentives that will make them comfortable enough to say, look, I am retiring. And for some others, let's retrain, let's re-educate them, let's get them to be productive in different ways that they will be comfortable to actually leave the service and start something on their own. But let's be honest about it. We cannot continue to allow this redundancy and, unproductive situation to remain in the system forever. Something needs to be done. And it is now that we need to do them. Let them do it.
So let me ask you another tough one, because this is focused on the civil service. Another question that has been raised is, do you think we've seen, the executive lead by example in this regard by cutting short the number of aides that have been hired under this administration, and not just the presidency, even the governors at all of the subnationals? Do you think that this is something that Nigerians can say, oh, we have seen leadership by example, so we are willing to follow through with any decision that follows?
Well, it's unfortunate. I don't have the figures of the number of aides and assistants that we have in the system currently. But of course, if we feel the number is too high, those who are in should do something about it. We should lead by example. And I know Mr. President to be one who is very, very good at that. He is always willing to do something to show his lieutenants that this is the way to go. So you may have the data, but unfortunately for me, I don't have it. I don't know how bloated the corp of assistantship and aides is as at now with the present government.
Well, we'll talk about the data some other time, so I don't also get myself into trouble. But Honorable, an 8-man committee now has a 12-week deadline to ensure that the necessary legislative amendments and administrative restructuring needed, is implemented. That timeline, what do you make of that timeline? Because earlier you mentioned that some of these agencies are backed by the Constitution, others are creation of the National Assembly. Is this a short-term proposal in the real sense of it, as a legislator yourself? As a legislator yourself?
Well, that's my area. And I know one thing very well. One of the things that really make a legislation thick is the amount of information, the amount of facts, data that's at the disposal of the members of the parliament. And sometimes you need 2, 3, 4 different aides, assistant, legislative aides, to go about getting a particular job done, because you need information from all over for you to get down and now aggregate them. So if I have a committee of 8, maybe having legislative aides, 12 or 16, cannot and should not be considered excessive. Not all the time, but most times you need more people on this job to gather sufficient data, information, facts about the same subject, so that it could be properly aggregated for you to arrive at acceptable and reasonable conclusions and decisions as far as legislative business is concerned.
So NLC kickstarted its 2-day nationwide protest today, and we saw some sort of appreciable response, across the states that were monitored. But the NLC president himself is talking about what he thinks is a slow pace, of fulfilling agreements reached with the federal government. For instance, he mentioned that if the issue of transportation had been fixed, the NLG buses that were promised, that if that had been fixed earlier on, perhaps the hardship being felt by many Nigerians, would have one way or the other, been eased. Do you think that the federal government can pick up the pace, or what's your idea of how much of speed you experience, or that you foresee, or that you think is happening really in the federal government's attempt to fix this problem?
Well, this government is less than 9 months old. And for us to expect that it can get everything done, all the wrongs of the past, all the problems that we created for ourselves over the decades, for that to be completed, completely taken care of in a year is impossible. We have to be honest with ourselves. There are things that we need to do that will take us 2, 3, 4, 5 years before we can get them done, or before we can see the results of what we have done. Of course, most of these problems is not just one man's problem. It's not a problem created even by just one administration. It's not a problem created by Adeyemi Ikuforiji or his friends and colleagues alone. It's a problem that we are all part of. We created those problems, and those problems will take time to get solved. I don't think this idea of strike, work rule and so on, I don't think they are the things that will solve Nigeria's problem. It's not about Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It is about Nigeria. And it is about the issues that have been mounting, problems that have been accumulating over a long time that we did not bother to take care of. I think enough is enough. We need to face them. And please, let's give this man and this administration the support. Let's give it the time to get this thing solved. By God's grace, the problems will be taken care of.
So recall that when President Tinubu returned, earlier on in the country, in the year, he met with governors, and one of the decisions he made, or the directive he gave to the governors, was that he pleaded with them to ensure all salary arrears and gratuities are paid to workers and pensioners, and that ensure that the monies are put into the hands of the people. He actually mentioned that they should spend the money and not spend the people. We've seen a remarkable increment in, how much is entering into the FAC and how much the government is making from the removal of food subsidy. Do you think that we're seeing appreciable impact at the state level?
Well, we know a lot that the federal government has done so far, and we do know also that aside from the individual groups like paying pension, paying outstandings to different group of people and different associations like the university teachers and so on, we know that the federal government in these last few months had already put more money in the pockets of the states and the local government. I think I joined the group of Nigerians who have said that it is time for the people to stop putting all the blames on the federal government. It is time for the people to ask the lower governments, the state governments, the local governments, what they are doing or what they have done with the extra inflow that they've had these last few months. If each and at every level of government in this country, if they are doing the same thing that the federal government is doing, if they put to use the extra income or revenue like we have all had, I think there will be a little, less discomfort to the people.
Yes.
The people will be a bit more comfortable.
We have to go now, but you mentioned that it's important that Nigerians give this administration some time. Do you have an idea of how long more you think things will improve and we'll begin to see the benefits of government's policies and decisions?
I'm not a soothsayer and I'm not Nostradamus, but I do know that some of these things within the next year or two, the results will be out and the comfort should come our way. Some of them are even going to yield long-term comfort for us as a people. It takes time to get some things sorted out, but with the way, even the little result we have seen, you know, at the macro level, we do know that this will trickle down very soon.
All right.
I think by this time next year, we won't be discussing the hardship as we are discussing today.
We're counting on that. Former Speaker, Lagos State House of Assembly, Adeyemi Kuforiji, thank you for talking to us on the program this evening.
Thank you very much, my brother.